Juan Behrend, could you tell us something about your involvement in the Green political movement and how you started your political activity in the environmental movement?
Well, as you know, I came from Argentina. I had to leave Argentina at the time because of the military dictatorship, and so I had to exile, and I came to Germany, where I retake my studies in Frankfurt, and this was the end of the 70s, and there was a moment when the discussions around the creation of the Green movement was taking place. So I was involved from the early steps of the Green Party or Green movement. At the time, the anti-nuclear movement was very strong, and the pacifist movement was quite strong, and the environmentalist movement, and so you get involved as a student in all this dynamics. And then I went to Italy, and there I had the opportunity to participate at the birth of the Green movement in Italy. This was beginning of the 80s. Mm-hmm. And then in 86 I came to the European Parliament, and I was quite soon became Secretary General of the Green Group in the European Parliament. I was Secretary General of the Green Group for around 20 years. And after that I became Secretary General of the European Green Party.
And what would you tell us about how the Green movement, and particularly in terms of party politics, and if there's been a change from it being a very broad movement to actually a political party which focused a lot more on elections, what would you say were the main sort of milestones or achievements in your sort of long involvement in the...
Well, I think there was a if you follow this history, you have different phases, but at the beginning it was not very clear for at least in Germany, but not only in Germany, if the Green movement should be more than a movement or should be a party, and then would come this definition: we are a party that is not a party, we are a party that's an anti-party. It was understood as a kind of bringing in the institutions the voice of the NGOs, of the civil society, of the different environmental and other protest movements. But it was the first period was not the intention to become strong in the institutions. So it was just to use the institution. Then there was a second phase, if you wish, the discussion about taking more responsibility or not. Mm-hmm. In the case of the German Greens, it was very clearly between Realos and Fundis. There were some who say we have to look for being part of the governments and present ourselves, look for coalitions and try to get influence in the governments, while another sector of the party said no, we should stay in the parliament, that's enough, and we should not take this kind of role. The end of the 90s, all this was clarified because in several countries the Greens get to government. Mm-hmm. As you know, they were in the government in Italy and Germany with Trétin and Fischer, and they were in the government in France with Dominique Voynet and others. So we get government responsibilities, and we were in 4 big countries represented in the government, also in Finland, and so that was the first big wake, if you wish, of green influence in at the political level. So all this discussion were behind us, and now the problem was to elaborate clear proposals. What are we going to, becoming from a protest party in a proposition party?
So you to change from being against things to being in favor of specific
yeah, but we were the world masters in describing the problems and the symptoms and so on, and the thing had to change in the sense to make really feasible, realistic political proposals, and that was not always proposed solutions. It was not always so easy.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the position of Greens now in terms of advancing as a political movement?
Yeah, well, I would enlarge the horizon, because, for instance, we have, well, it's clear. The first sentence to react to your question is to refer to the German electoral result of the last weekend, which is really extraordinary. And the fact that for the first time the German Greens will lead a big land of more than 6 million people, and they're one of the most developed lands in the country. But maybe I come back to this later on for a minute. But I think we have to be broader in our analysis, because if you look at what happened, for instance, in Brazil, where the Greens, thanks to Marina Silva, but not only, because they exist there now for 20 years and have a consistent history as a Green Party, they were able to be supported by 20 million Green voters, which is putting it, making a comparison, more than what the European Greens obtain in European elections. So it's an enormous amount of votes, and we will see how this develops, but I am quite confident that they will be able to transform this strong political support in a more permanent and well-structured party. Also the example of Colombia, where we were at the brink of being able to get the presidency, to win the presidential elections with Antanas Mockus, which is a very surprising thing. It's clear that this movement there you cannot compare it with the traditional green movements in Europe with 10, 15, 20 years or more of experience and activities and so on, but it emerged in a very spontaneous and strong, in a very quick dynamic, let's say. But it's impressive. They got at the end, even if you might be a little bit disappointed because they were even better in the opinion polls, but they got 27% for the presidential elections, which is enormous. And just in Africa, there is a movement coming up. We have now also in the context of this democratization process in North Africa, there are green parties emerging in different of these countries. In Tunis, in Lebanon, we have a nice green party, and there's a little green party in Egypt. So I see, there are more than 80 green parties around in the world. So that I think we have to put this in this context, and I have the impression that there is a process of consolidation, because we have the problem in Europe that there's you can say a big asymmetry. You have the situation that you are very strong in Germany, but then you're very weak in some other countries. So, but if you put it in a context, I would say the green movement is growing and is taking more and more responsibility. And one, if I may, I think what happened in Germany is extremely important. It's this fact that we won this land, of course, helped because of the catastrophe in Fukushima. But not only, because the opinion polls were very positive for the Greens long before Fukushima, and there were some elections that showed that we were growing. But the main question is that this result is part of a process of a shift of the opinion in Germany concerning nuclear energy, or concerning all the energy package. And you have seen now, immediately after, about some weeks before this, the CDU, the Christian Democrat Party, saying, well, we have to abandon nuclear, even if they had presented 3 months ago a law asking for a prolongation of the nuclear plants. The Liberals saying from one day after the election, we have to abandon nuclear. So there's a shift of the energy policies, which might, I say might, and I put this in brackets because it's very, very unclear if this will be the case, mean a shift of Germany for a non-nuclear energy path, and even not just a non-nuclear, but a non-nuclear, not non-coal energy path based in renewables. If this is the case, what is happening today in Germany will have a lasting impact, not just in Germany, but in the rest of Europe, and I think even globally, because it's a highly industrialized country. that decides to abandon nuclear, even if until 1 month ago they say we have the most sure nuclear plants of the world, and we can continue with this for the next 40 years. That's an enormous change, and I hope that this might even lead to a process of rethinking the energy policies all over Europe, including France.